Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine in that sense. So it's kind of, I mean, plant medicine we've been using since the beginning of time. It's our oldest form of healing in that way. So this is just using, I'm a really big believer, and actually the reason I chose Western medical herbalism over traditional Chinese medicine, which I was considering, is because I'm a big believer in what grows around you is what your body would need to heal. And there are so many medicinal herbs in Europe, and people just don't really know, and lots of people don't really know about them. And I just think it's so, I absolutely love the plant kingdom. I love learning about plants. I love incorporating herbalism and cooking. So yeah, I'm in my second year. I did a foundation year. Now I'm in my first year of the professional course, and there's 2 more years. And next year I start my clinical placements. That's where you go and then you go and like be in the clinic practice. At the moment, I'm still just learning a lot about, so much to learn, but all the kind of chemical constituents. So there's a lot of chemistry and there's a lot of biology, learning about how they interact in the human body. We do need to know a little bit about conventional drugs, because obviously they can interact with herbs. So but I just find it fascinating. There's so many plants out there, and we never really taught about them, and it's kind of crazy.
Of course I think the same, you know, like especially also with young kids or at school, like, you know, it would be amazing if also, I'm sure you live in Maastricht, I'm the same here in Amsterdam, I live close to Boston, have a lot of green around me, and you know, like sometimes I go to Amstel Park and I get some herbs from there and I put them in my salads. You know, it's like, hey, I have Amstel Park on my plate. You know, like it's but yeah, you do need to. And I really liked what you said about, and this is a really important point, and I want to like ask you a little bit more, a few more questions about that. Is this kind of in being the individual? You know, because I always felt like, how is one pill going to, you know, be good for everyone? Like that's what we do here. Oh, you have a headache, here's the, you know, you take this, you know, go, you know, whereas there is no, like, you know, we're not really looking at people on an individual level. And because I'm starting a foundation course for Ayurveda. I want to be an Ayurveda health coach, because I'm really interested, like you also. I feel what I love about Ayurveda, and also what you're just describing, is how old these practices already are. And so in my opinion, it's like, well, if it's 5,000, if they already did it 5,000 years ago, it's probably something there,
something working.
You know, there's something going on there. And of course, you know, in Ayurveda, we look at the doshas, the constitutions of people. How do you look at people then from an individual level if someone would come up to you and as a client or as a patient?
So for example, with the headache, as you just mentioned, the headache, you kind of look at the reason. So when you just said, oh, you take a pill for a headache, headaches are caused by many, many different things. So there are certain herbs that would treat headaches that potentially are stress related. There are certain herbs that would treat headaches that might be due to dehydration. There might be headache due to, you know, whatever, sugar, or looking at diet, like how much sugar and caffeine is this person consuming. So what a medical herbalist would have an hour or even longer with the first consultation, which is completely in contrast to a Western medical doctor who sees someone for maybe 5-10 minutes, and that's apparently enough to get enough information. So, and you there's a lot of questions about lifestyle, diet, things that have happened, like also a lot of so if there's a trauma, for example, that's happened, it could be that the person's holding that in their body and that's creating symptoms. So you kind of just look at the big picture. What is going on? What kind of job do they have? What kind of relationships do they have? What kind of food do they eat? Are they nourishing themselves? And then we also ask for medical history, obviously, because most people will have seen a doctor and they'll have some kind of idea. And then, so if, for example, you need to know if someone's on any medication or has high blood pressure or anything like that. And then you tailor a prescription for them with herbs that will treat the different things. So someone might be presenting with anxiety, headaches, and insomnia. And you can, if you know which herbs treat those different things, you can produce a blend specifically for that person, rather than just saying, because they might also be caused by different things. So if someone has a lot of grief, for example, hawthorn is a really good herb for that. So you'd be treating someone potentially with hawthorn, and then other herbs rose is a really beautiful herb for heart opening and connection. But it's about the herbs and the person and how they interact. And actually also if the first prescription maybe doesn't quite work on some symptoms, but it's helping in some ways, you can always adjust it so they can come back, and then you can talk to them again. It's just developing that relationship with plants and healing people in a way that is not just one size fits all, and it never will be.
Exactly.
I don't think it will ever be.
Exactly, but that's also exactly something that I've always been. Is the same with the Chinese medicine. It was always such an interesting thing for me. Like, we should look at people individually. It's also, I mean, you were just mentioning you're a yoga teacher. It's the same for me. Like, it's also, as a yoga teacher, you can't just say like, everybody does this one thing. Like, it's you will have people will do things differently. You need to do things differently according to their body and their capabilities. And it's really interesting what you just said about, for example, or you were just mentioning about rose, and because it seems like it's not just medical, it's also there's also a spiritual side to what you're describing.
I would say there's a definite spiritual side. It also really depends on the practitioner. Some are really clinical and much more, but because I come from a spiritual background, and that's how I also view plants as quite a spirit, like my relationship with plants is kind of sacred. So I view them as, there's an energetic to plants. You can actually study herbalism in that way as well, and just learn more about the energetic. I mean, anyone can study herbalism, but whether or not you're a medical herbalist is different. But there's also, you can look at the energetics of herbs. There's astrology in herbs. Each herb is like ruled by a different planet and things like that. There's quite a lot in the world of plants. So there's a bit for if you're kind of interested in herbalism, there's always going to be a teacher for you. But there's definitely, I would definitely say there's a spiritual aspect to it. I think it's when someone is, I personally believe a lot of our ailments or illnesses that we call them are actually probably happening more on a spiritual level to a certain extent, and they're coming out in our physical realm.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to treat.
They start manifesting in our bodies.
And then it's kind of understanding why. I mean, obviously it's not just understanding it, but actually I did forget to mention as well, this is a really important point, that herbs alone are probably not going to help you. So one thing that many people will have an issue with is lifestyle changes, because you do have to say to people, like, you're not exercising, so you might need to move a bit, and like eat better.
You can keep taking that rose, but
it's not going to work unless you like change. So I think there's an element of responsibility for your own health a little bit as well, because if you put herbs in a body that is not, if you don't do the other changes that are probably recommended, they may not have as much impact. They probably will help, but not as much impact. So I think that's just an important thing.
What attracted you so much to become an herbalist? Like, did you also really adapt it in your life, or? So
I used to be a florist, and and I've always spent I grew up in the English countryside and spent a lot of time in nature as a child.
So cool.
And I absolutely loved flowers, and I was a yoga teacher, then I became a florist, and I think I loved the embodiment work, but felt something was missing a bit with yoga. So then I was like, maybe I should work with flowers for a while. So I did that, and I absolutely loved it. But then I was like, there's something missing here. I want to know more about these plants and flowers. And then I don't really know how it happened, but I kind of stumbled across herbalism, and I was like, okay, this is it. It's because it's got the kind of, you can still, the beauty of flowers and herbs are there, but you're really appreciating them. The floristry industry is also very bad for the environment, and that was one of the reasons I moved away from it to a certain extent as well, because it's quite a hard industry to kind of work in and feel that you're having that negative impact, whereas herbalism, most herbalists try and grow at least some of their own herbs, and it's kind of a loving relationship with Mother Earth rather than just taking.
Can I go a step back? Can you explain why is it so bad?
Well, most flowers are kind of grown in Kenya and then shipped across. So
exactly.
And then there's a lot of them are actually in Holland, where we are now, and then there's the Dutch flower market. It's environmentally bad. I think it's also, there's quite a lot of workers' rights issues going on in the supply chain. So there's that, but it's not very sustainable in terms of how you're producing flowers, and there's a lot of waste. There's a lot of plastic wrapped around flowers. florists traditionally used to use oasis, which is like this foam.
Yeah.
So I mean, I love flowers, and I still have flowers in my home, and I think it's a hard thing to completely, say no one should ever buy flowers because but they really bring joy. But I think there's definitely
there's also
a bit
of
reform that needs to happen with the industry, and I just really wasn't in a place to start reforming the floristry industry. And the waste you see as well, if you work in a busy florist, there's a lot of flowers that just get thrown away at the end of the week, and we did take some home, but then it's like, this is really sad that
I always feel that too, like with like I don't, for example, I don't really like to have flowers for that reason as well. It's just like, for me, it's always, I even feel bad about taking flowers from nature because I feel they belong in nature. I mean, that's just I love it too, because I like you, I have some altos in my house, and it looks really beautiful when it's there. And of course, when people gift me flowers, I feel very grateful for it. But, it's something to me. And I don't know, I have this weird thing that when I was younger as well, flowers always made me think of funerals for some reason. I don't know. I just get a little bit depressed. I sort of I got a little depressed from flowers. I don't know why. But there's nothing like when I see a field of sunflowers, for example, those beautiful long, sunflowers, I get so happy. So, I understand your love for flowers for sure.
Yeah. I think and then I think it's because I'm now growing my own flowers and herbs, and that's for me a much more nourishing and nurturing relationship to have with them, because then, I'm giving back to the earth a little bit as well. And I think this kind of consumer-led society, it's like, oh, the flowers belong to us, and it's like, well, maybe they don't really.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe they really belong in the earth, but at the same time they do make people really happy, and I think that's great for people's mental health. So it's like I think there's a balance to be had. But so, and then I tried to, anyway, so aside from the
go back to herbalism.
I think I just kind of with the yoga I really wanted to add another healing element, which is probably why you're also going down the Ayurveda route, because I think you can move a lot with embodiment and movement, but at the same time it's really good if you can add that extra herbal element or Ayurvedic 100%.
Element. Exactly. That's really how I feel too. Because because it is all healing, and there's something so. And I think, is this your experience as well? I think so many people, and like exactly what we just said about the headache and the pill. So many people, guys, if you go to a normal doctor, they're not going to ask you about your diet or if you exercise or anything like that. And I think so many people don't know the healing powers of food, of good food, and changing your food habits, for example. Like, do you see that a lot as well in your,
I do see that. I actually find it really interesting, our relationship with food, because I grew up with quite a healthy mother, so I was quite lucky in that sense. But then I remember school food in the UK was so bad.
That's also insane, right? Yeah, what they give in schools and hospitals. I mean,
how are you supposed to be you're growing and you're like learning and in this environment, and then they give you this awful food. And it's just, for me, it's quite fascinating how we developed such a bad relationship with food. And also how removed we are from the food we eat. People don't grow hardly. Well, now people during the pandemic actually have started growing more food, so that's great. But a lot of the time, people don't really even know like where their food comes from. How vegetables are grown, whether they're shipped miles across the world. But aside from that, I mean, diet is basically, I think food is medicine to a certain level. It is medicine. So if you feed yourself a nourishing diet, you're much more likely to be a well person. But having said that, there's no specific food that's going to work for every individual. So you do have to look at the different constitution and how they interact. Like they may have allergies to certain things, but if more people ate a whole food diet, I think a lot of health problems would be definitely improving. But and also just our relationship with food as women. It's like a lot of women have eating disorders or fear of food. I mean, I'm a massive carb lover and food lover, so I'm not. I don't know. I'm just a bit like, well, food is good, but I know that a lot of people have struggles around that too. So
Yeah, because food for a long time, like I've had an eating disorder when I was younger, and food was the enemy. And so then later on in life, when I became a chef, I was always just like, it was nearly having a, you know, sort of like a new relationship with food again, and sort of